Hello, everyone. I'm George Bitar. I'm one of the co-founders of SEAL, and on behalf of the Beirut Emergency Fund, I'd like to thank you for participating in our webinar today, which, as you know, was formed, the fund that is, was formed after the aftermath of the port of Beirut explosion. I want to first just briefly cover the program today. After a quick video, I will give you a progress report on how your donation dollars have been committed and where they are being deployed. I will then introduce our four distinguished panelists who will each have a chance to present to you their take on the explosion, how it impacted their institution or organization, their status report, and the challenges they continue to face. Afterwards, we'll open it up for a Q&A. I will please ask you, if you have a question, to refer to the module Q&A at the bottom of your screen. Type your question. We will do our best to make sure all of your questions are answered to the extent they are specifically addressed to one of the panelists, if you don't mind mentioning the name of the panelist in your question. George Ai from LebNet has very kindly offered to be our audio-video host. So thank you, George. And with that, if you don't mind running the video.
صار أول انفجار وثاني انفجار وراح كل البيوت العالم ضحايا.
It's hard not to be emotional when you see footage like that. In any case, on behalf of SEAL and our partners in the Beirut Emergency Fund, LIFE, LebNet, Jamhour, and the Kuwait America Foundation, I'd like to thank you for attending this webinar and for your incredibly generous donations. Thanks to all of you, so far we've raised more than $8.2 million from over 7,000 donors from all over the world. And amazingly, from many that are non-Lebanese. The money was raised to provide aid to those affected by the August 4th tragic port of Beirut explosion, considered the largest non-nuclear detonation ever recorded. As you know, Lebanon is facing crises within crises, political, social, economical, financial, not to mention the pandemic. So the explosion of the port only aggravated what was already a very dire situation. GDP for 2020 is estimated to probably contract by more than 20 to 30%. There are estimates that would put it at even 50%. Inflation is rampant at triple digit. Unemployment is at 30% and rising very fast, and it's much higher for the young ones. As you know, the currency is in free fall, and permanent immigration is accelerating. The World Bank, as you will hear from one of our panelists, is estimating that approximately 50% of the population is living below the poverty line, which effectively means that our middle class has been totally wiped out. Depositors don't have access to their life savings, and the central bank is expected to run out of dollars used to import medicine, flour, and gas in the next few months. In the background of this very difficult situation, the diaspora has been responding to it even before the port explosion. As an example, SEAL did a food drive back in the spring, helping over 30,000 families. LIFE has been extremely active in food and medical distribution all over Lebanon. LebNet has been providing badly needed training for technology entrepreneurs in Lebanon and helping secure internship with global technology companies. Jamhour, of course, has been helping offset the cost of tuitions for hundreds and hundreds of students. So we came together to form this coalition, which thanks to you, thanks to all of you, have exceeded our expectation. Of course, I had to. And I'm very hopeful. In fact, I'm hopeful of this collaboration. In fact, I can assure you the future is bright if the example of our kids is any indication. I mean, hundreds of thousands of dollars have been raised by initiatives of young Lebanese in their 20s. Friends got together, started GoFundMe drives to support the Beirut Emergency Fund. 24-hour DJs were held, DJ concerts were held, art auctions were also held and organized. Restaurants got pulled together. I mean, donations came from all over the world: Latin America, Canada, Europe, Switzerland, Dubai, and many other Gulf countries. And as I said earlier, the many non-Lebanese donations were so generous, and it's really uplifting and heartwarming. I'll be reporting very briefly on the decisions we've made on your behalf, as well as give you a chance to hear directly from a sample of the NGO partners we chose to collaborate with, and hear directly from them what is happening on the ground and ask them questions. As you know, the cost to repair the damaged areas is estimated in the billions. But we were told repeatedly not to underestimate the financial and also psychological impact that the Beirut Emergency Fund support is having. A lot of aid is being promised, but very slow to arrive. And the Beirutis are knowing that they're not alone, and that the diaspora is mobilizing and helping, is giving a big morale boost. So again, we can't thank you enough for your generous donation. And now let me get into the details of what we have done so far. Next slide, George. So we decided early on to really try to be narrow and deep and focus on really two sectors or two areas: the hospital and medical and mental health support, and shelter, rehabilitation, and reconstruction. All of the NGOs that we have chosen to partner with have undergone a rigorous vetting and due diligence process. We got to understand exactly how they operate. They got to submit very detailed proposals on how they plan to use the funds that we would be providing them. They all were agreed to sign grant agreements that specifically lays out deliverables and timelines, as well as an ability for us to have access after the fact to be able to monitor the progress of the project. Funds are being committed, but not directly funded. They are funded incrementally, or I should say dispersed incrementally, and the organization's banks are contacted beforehand to ensure that the funds are available immediately. In many cases, we are opting, if we can, to buy directly materials, especially if the materials are imported. We look to try to pay the suppliers outside of Lebanon, and therefore minimizing the exposure to the banking system. We've had several Beirut Emergency Fund team members on the ground, and I'd like to take this opportunity to really recognize a few of them who have really worked tirelessly since August 4th. And those are Nadine Masoud, Norma Haddad, Zaina Mhanna, Zaina Farhat, Jumana Tajir, Philippa Saili, Nasif, Wakim, and a special thank you for Nicolas Mnassa, who, thanks to his experience in construction project management, has been invaluable in helping us navigate what has proven to be a very challenging task. He actually was able to help us achieve cost efficiencies, and in doing that, really get your higher yield on your donated dollars. So thank you, Nicola, and the team. Next slide. We have so far, out of the $8.2 million that have been raised, $5.2 million have been allocated, 2.7 to hospitals and the medical fields, 2.5 million for rehabilitation and reconstruction, primarily of residential units, although in some cases, small businesses as well. We continue to consider new NGOs to add, but we're also quite focused on trying to continue to fund as they finish deploying our existing allocations, continue to fund the existing pool of NGOs. Next slide, please. On the hospital and so far we've funded or committed to fund 3 hospitals: the Saint George Hospital, and we have today with us Edgar Juju, the CEO of the hospital, and you'll hear from him directly. The funds will help rebuild 2 ICU units. We also have committed to the Jaitawi Hospital, where we will be replacing all of their elevators, fire-rated doors, and all of their glass and aluminum needs, as well as funding partially the needs for Hotel Dieu. We are currently reviewing, I would say, 1 more hospital, and we're still in the process of reviewing their budget and their proposal. Next slide.
Sorry to interrupt, but I'm actually on the. Which slide are you reading? Sorry, I know it looks like you're behind by 1 slide on me. I'm showing the one that has Arc-en-Ciel.
You have to go back.
Okay, so are you watching what I'm? Okay, so you were here. Okay, go ahead.
Well, I wasn't really watching, but I was
okay.
talking. So this is the right one. Now you can move to the next one, George, if you don't mind. On the medical and mental health support, a total of $1 million, which have gone to, I'm not going to list all of these very worthy NGOs who we are very pleased to have teamed up with. I'll let you read some of it, some of their descriptions, but basically it's a lot of support for the needy, mental support, rehabilitation of primary healthcare centers, trying to build a task force to really have home care services to especially the elderly that are the most in need. Next one, George. On rehabilitation and reconstruction, I have to say this has proven to be the most challenging part for us, because as you can imagine, given the magnitude of the damage, the need for a crisis management center is needed, and so far does not exist. I mean, we have been therefore trying to allocate to coordinate with the Army, with OSHA, as well as trying to make sure that the various NGOs were collaborating with each other. So again, I will not list all of the names that you can read here, but basically we're looking at it so far a total of roughly 700 residential units, a number of commercial units as well, and the work is being done with. We were inspired in some case, in one case, by the offre joie business model, which I'll let Mark describe later on, which we found to be very efficient in terms of their ability to get their work done in a very efficient and fast manner. And others ended up adopting similar business model, which we think is very productive. Next. Just to visualize where the work is taking place. So the blue line, if you will, is where offre joie is working, quite close to the Karantina hospital. The purple is where Beit el-Baraka is focused on, and is primarily around the St. George hospital area. And the Nusanid is working on in and around Burj Hamoud and the Itawa area as well. Next, please. So I hope this was informative and helpful to you all. I'm certainly happy to take some of your questions, although I'm hoping most of the questions will be directed to the panelists. And to that end, I would like to introduce our first panelist, Haneen Sayed. Haneen is a lead specialist at the World Bank, focused on Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, Iraq, and Iran. Since the beginning of the financial crisis, Haneen has been leading the World Bank social response to the crisis, including a large-scale emergency social safety net. She's obviously a very accomplished economist, having had degrees from Stanford and Columbia University, and we are very honored and pleased to have Haneen as part of the panel today. Haneen, it's all yours.
Thank you very much, George, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everybody. It's really a pleasure for me and an honor to have been invited to this event. I was asked to present some macroeconomic and social view of what is the situation in Lebanon based on the kind of analysis at the World Bank we've conducted. But this is also beyond just me presenting these numbers. As I personally was in the explosion, I have been impacted heavily myself, my family, my housing. And it's very important to look beyond the numbers. And what George just talked about in terms of how the NGO sector has jumped to the occasion is just absolutely amazing. It actually shames us as organizations such as World Bank, where we are far slower in getting into action. So I just want to make that point. So what we did do, however, as World Bank, immediately after the Port of Beirut explosion, was to conduct a rapid damage and needs assessment. I will show a few figures from that. We started on August 5 and we completed the report. This was joint with UN and the EU, and it was launched on August 31st. So it's very, very quick. However, it was very deep. We looked at more than 16 sectors, including the macroeconomic sectors, but health, education, housing, transport, and so on. Using satellite imagery as well as rapid surveys from the ground. And of course, working with all partners that are in Lebanon, both government, non-government, private sector, what have you. So I'll give a quick summary of what those findings is to give the context of the kind of work that the NGOs are doing on the ground, how important it is and how relevant. So it's no surprise that Lebanon is facing compounded crises. You all know this, but it's actually quite unique that within 1 year, balance of payment crisis erupted. Then it became a full-scale economic and banking sector crisis, the COVID-19 pandemic, and then, of course, the Port of Beirut disaster. And all of this, as you know, Lebanon already has been going through a 10 years refugee crisis, hosting a very large number of refugees, and almost unprecedented, in fact, in recent history. And all of this is on top of long-term structural bottlenecks in the economy. Again, I think many of you are familiar with that, but it's important to keep remembering to give a sense of how difficult the situation is in the country. Next slide, please, George. So George Bitar already mentioned the numbers from our projections, where we are looking at 2020, a minus 20% GDP growth. The IMF has recently said it's minus 24. All of these are very, very large number, but this comes at the heel of a contraction of 2019, so, and even 2018. So we're talking about 3 years of a recession. This is very, very serious, and its impact on people and poverty and employment is very, very high. Inflation, again, has been mentioned, is also very high. And the significance with the Port of Beirut explosion is that it added on top of that, it added further declines on GDP.
عشان هيك بقول لك ماما دائما قومي ركزي وبعدين شوفي حالك. للسبعة لترين ساعة.
Somebody mute their mic.
Oh, sorry. I don't know what's going on.
So just to say that the Port of Beirut explosion had two additional impacts. One is, of course, the damage of the physical capital, but also in terms of the trade loss. The Port of Beirut was about the gateway to Lebanon's trade. About 65% of it went through Beirut's port. So this is, again, a very, very significant loss, which will continue, for a few years until there is reconstruction. Next slide, please. So as mentioned, and I think very often it's been heard in the press about the poverty numbers. I do want to preface to say that unfortunately, in terms of actual real surveys on poverty in Lebanon, we do not have. This is being, we have an issue in terms of the data availability. However, in terms of forecasting using GDP growth and so on, the numbers that we have, estimates that we have come up is that extreme poverty, extreme poverty, which is essentially looking at those who cannot afford their daily caloric intake, has doubled over the past few years. Today, about 22% of the population, actually as of March 15, and this has probably gone much higher, 22% of the population is under the food poverty line, cannot afford their own food needs, and close to 50% of the population is on the overall poverty line. And it's important also worthy to note that the Syrian crisis as a whole has itself had an impact in terms of overall poverty increase in Lebanon between the years 2012 and 2017. This is not about the impact of the refugees, but overall impact of the crisis. So again, it's just illustrative of the regional effects on Lebanon. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that we did this rapid damage and needs assessment in August, and a quick overview of the numbers. The total physical damages that we've estimated are 3.8 to 4.6 billion. The biggest sector that's been impacted is housing, of course, and then culture. And then you have the other sectors. Now, health, I put it highlighted in yellow, in the yellow box, because it's what a big subject of us today, has also had significant damage of about maybe 100 million damages. About 36% of the hospital health facilities in Lebanon have been damaged one way or the other, or impacted from the port of Beirut. So this is very significant. And most of that is for hospitals. But there's also large economic losses, and not just from physical. Again, the housing sector, transport, and port top the numbers on that. These are we're pretty comfortable with these figures. However, it doesn't mean that they would not be updated, and as they should be, but it gives you a sense of the magnitude of the damages. Next slide, please. This is just to show you more graphically where the damages are. Housing sector is the largest one, and then cultural heritage, and but essentially all of these sectors have had significant losses. And bottom line, the needs are very large. Last slide, please. So I don't want to end really with a just sort of a down or a negative view on this. I mean, there is definitely a lot of needs, and impact has been huge. But I think it's important to keep in mind that there is a way out. Lebanon has, we all know what needs to be done in a way, and this, I will not go through this, but it's a comprehensive program is absolutely needed. One that really looks, has the whole macro financial situation, looks at the debt, the financial sector, the social safety net, and the like. And I believe, at least from the international community's point of view, that we're ready to support Lebanon. There needs to be reforms. I think this has been said over and over, and this is actually quite significant, quite fundamental. At the same time, we are also putting together some thinking about how we can, until the government's established and the reforms have started to take place, we know that there's also urgent needs to the population, and ourselves looking at putting together a financing facility which would also support the NGO sector. So thank you very much, and back to you, George.
Thank you, Haneen. Very informative indeed, and I look forward to and your answers to many questions we're receiving. Next is Edgar Joujou. Edgar Joujou is the CEO of the St. George Hospital, which I guess pre-COVID had 385 beds, among the top 3 hospitals in Lebanon. Severely damaged, and I'll let him walk you through his experience on August 4th. Edgar?
Thank you, George, and thank you very much, SEAL and all the donors behind it. Really, St. George Hospital has a long history in Lebanon, and we've survived various disasters. We've fought through the long civil war in Lebanon, and we've never had, we were never brought to a complete stop as we have been on the 4th of August. Can we start with the slides, please? Next, or no. This is an overview of our hospital. You can see the helipad, which is really a lifeline for we're one of two helipads in the region, in Beirut, sorry, and it's a lifeline for the army, for UNIFIL, and for some embassies. And you can see in the background the old hospital, which is probably the longest standing hospital in Lebanon. I think we are the oldest national hospital in Lebanon, and definitely one of the oldest in the region. Next, please. Next slide. Yeah, as you see, we were established in 1878 as a not-for-profit community hospital. We've always depended on the charitable donations. I mean, the land itself, our hospital is on, was donated, and the new hospital, the modern hospital, as you see it, and state-of-the-art came about. I mean, the last phase was completed some 11 years ago, and most of it was a result of generous donations from the community in Lebanon, from the diaspora, from the Arab world, and from the Americas and Europe. As I said before, even the Lebanese conflict, Lebanese civil war, did not dampen our enthusiasm. And despite the fact that the hospital was severely impacted during that period, it never came to a halt as it did on the 4th of, in the wake of the 4th of August explosion. Many things have changed over the years, but St. George will always be committed to fighting the challenge and helping rebuild the community in terms of healthcare, education, and research. Next slide, please. Yeah, I mean, our proximity to the port, although we used to pride ourselves on the fact that we have some patient room overlooking the port, and the sea proved to be our unmaking. Unfortunately, on the human side, we lost 4 nurses and 27 patients and few of our medical staff. I think our nurses especially have written a new chapter in resilience and in humanity. I mean, whereas we've always been told that the human instinct is fight or flight. Some nurses added another dimension, which is help others. I mean, whereas a lot of us would have probably hit, after the explosion, ran for our lives, our nurses decided to reach out for babies, for the wounded, and for their colleagues. We had to evacuate some 160 patients. I think it's even more than that. And we made a makeshift hospital in the parking outside the hospital. And it took us, I mean, the explosion happened around 6 o'clock in the evening, and it took us until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to evacuate all our patients. A lot of this was done without electricity, and in fact, done with using sometimes the light of mobile phones. I've been told by one of our doctors that not since Hurricane Katrina has an evacuation of this scale taken place from a hospital. We suffered, I mean, of course, our main loss is on the human side, but we bore the brunt of destruction. I mean, the initial estimate of our losses ran into tens of millions of dollars, very expensive. Luckily, the building itself is, the structure is sound. However, nothing was left untouched. We need four of our 12 elevators need total replacement, and we lost 90% of our windows. The electromechanical infrastructure received a lot of damage, and that's not to count the operational losses which we will sustain over the next few months, given that we are committed to not downsizing or making anybody redundant, especially our nurses and our doctors. Next slide, please. I think both George and Haneen have given you some background on what's happening in Lebanon. Yeah, these are just a few of, this is a typical, this is not an atypical room. This is the sort of damage that the bedroom sustained. Next, let's just go through them. This is, again, shows you all the false ceiling, electricity. We had to turn off the electricity quite quickly. This is why we were forced to evacuate in darkness. Luckily, this spared most of our expensive equipment, such as MRIs, CT scans, etc., because our engineers were quick to switch off electricity and spare them. Anyway, next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, this is, tells a story. The blood all over and, damage. Next slide, please. Yeah, I was saying, George and Haneen spoke about the macroeconomic, and I mean, this, the 4th of August made it a near perfect storm for us because we have the economic crisis, the free fall of the Lebanese pound. I mean, a lot of our purchases and supplies are in US dollars. Then you have the COVID-19 pandemic. St. George Hospital was I think the first private hospital to open its doors to receive corona patients. We've been at the forefront of developing algorithms for dealing with COVID patients. We opened a drive-through for testing, and then we were stopped. We now resumed our drive-through for COVID-19 testing. However, we are not receiving COVID patients because our infrastructure has been compromised. Instead, what we did was we took over a hospital, Lebanese Canadian hospital. We sent our staff. We spent some money on rehabilitating it. We've got now 15 rooms there, and we're looking to expand it. So we're back playing our role in fighting COVID-19 cases. We've got our staff there, we've got our nurses there, and we're doing it totally free.
Thank you, Nigar. Thank you very much. In the interest of time, I want to make sure that we get to the other panelists. Meanwhile, Haneen has been very kind to be answering on the Q&A module many of the questions that are addressed to her. So we're, in that sense, things are going in parallel. I'd like to introduce Dr. Elio Sassin, who is Vice President of an NGO called, acronym is APEG, Association pour la Protection de l'Enfant de la Guerre. Elio hopefully will be able to talk about children trauma, adult trauma, and the efforts that they're doing to mitigate the trauma of the explosion. Elio, is all yours.
Thank you, George. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Seal, for your support and for hosting us tonight in a much needed webinar. We pray for a constant and solid internet connection. I hope you can hear me. I will introduce our NGO, which is called Association pour la Protection de l'Enfant de la Guerre. We've been here since 1996. Remember when the Israeli invasion in 1996, which was, I think, called the Grapes of Ras or something like that, and the famous, unfortunately, Kana massacre at the UN camp. So this is when our NGO was founded in collaboration with the French government at the time. And the goal of our NGO was to implement free mental health clinics all over Lebanon. This is our center. We started in Beirut in Karantina Hospital, which at the time was still wreck after the war. It was not functional yet. This is our center in Nabatieh, and above the hills, the Israeli were still there at the time. It was still under occupation. So we started in 1996 with the goal of offering free mental health services, mostly for war-related events, war-related traumas, and mostly for children after the Kana massacre. But as soon as we got there, we were addressed by people, and we were the first one to offer free mental health services in Lebanon. So we were addressed by people of all ages and with all kinds of mental disorders. We got people with depression, schizophrenia, bipolar, whatever. So we had to widen our scope and accept, of course, people of all ages, and we started covering all disorders. So at some point we had, as you can see on the map, 5 clinics all over Lebanon, going from Tripoli to Beirut to Zahli and Baalbek, Nabatieh, Sur, Tyre, and at one point we had one in Majrayoun. Due to financial issues, we had to close some of these. This is an old map. I chose it because it shows at the time how what they would call the security region was still under Israeli control. Our headquarters and our main clinic is in Beirut, is in Mar Mikhael. This is of importance now, unfortunately. So what have we done since 1996 till now? We've done nearly 71,000 consultations, which amounts to around 10,000 patients. We see, as I said, children and adolescents, a bit more of kids and adolescents than adults, but we still have a lot of adults. We do assessments, of course. We offer psychological therapies, psychotherapies, CBT or other. We psychiatrists, of course, offer pharmacotherapy, biological treatments when needed. At some point, we had a social worker who would do school visits and home visits, especially in the south. Also due to financial reasons, we had to get rid of this part. We have psychologists who go to prisons, to Rumi prisons, and do inmates visits and follow up. And this last part is also very important. We've been doing for the past few years legal expertise with the juge des enfants, يعني قاضي الأحداث, for children who are victim of sexual harassment or who have family problems, etc. So this covers our activities for the past 25 years. On August 4th, okay, you know what happened. And since then, I'm just showing these pictures to show you that the victims of the blast are not only those people you can see in pictures. This is a direct victim. This is someone who has been wounded or people who died. But we also have to care about these caretakers, okay, and about people who are even far. I will talk about that a bit in a while. What happened on August 4th by psychiatric criteria, this trauma, this blast, is the ultimate thing that a human being can endure. This is our headquarters. This is the blast location in the port, and we are here, just across the port, in one of the areas covered by offre joie, indeed, in fact. This is Room Hospital, and this is Karantina Hospital. So we're not even 300 meters across from the explosion. This is our building the day following the blast. These are our premises, okay, computers, everything was totally destroyed. Now, thanks to APEG, we're building, we're rebuilding. We're in the process of rebuilding. We've been seeing patients after we cleaned up since then. I'm gonna go a bit into medical technicalities, but it will be very short, just to tell you that what we expect to see and what we are starting to see are many forms of mental problems and mental disorders. First, we have a lot of people who, after such an event, and I'm insisting on the quality of the event, of the blast. In Arabic, they say "Shayf al-Maut." This is essential for developing PTSD. Not any trauma will lead to PTSD. PTSD is post-traumatic stress disorder. It's one of the most common post-traumatic disorders after such events. So the event has to be very, very traumatic. People would experience death, or would experience, would fear death, okay, and would feel, this is very important, totally helpless. They can do nothing about what is happening around them. And this is why I was telling you before that this would not only affect the direct victims or people who help. Even, that this explosion was so cataclysmic that even people who were living, very far away from the explosion thought they were in fact dying, or that it was in their neighborhood. So we think that there are at least 300 to 500 people directly affected by the blast. I mean psychologically, okay? Studies around the world in such cases show that 10 to 30% of people would develop PTSD. Sorry, I went a bit far. So we are really expecting, and we are starting to see a lot of people having a lot of symptoms. It does not have to be PTSD. PTSD, it's reminiscing the event, having nightmares, a lot of symptoms. But we see people with generalized anxiety. We see kids who cannot sleep anymore, or are afraid to sleep alone. We see people with a lot of somatization, and I'm sure you hear about people around you who are complaining of these. And we really expect, and we are already seeing, as I said, a lot of people suffering from all these symptoms and disorders, and someone has to take care of them. And as you know, in Lebanon, most medical care is very expensive. Psychiatric care, of course, is also expensive. So this is our particularity, where we give free of charge assessment and treatment. To end on a positive note, okay, we always talk about the famous resilience, Lebanese resilience, and the phoenix rising from its ashes, etc. Je veux bien, comme on dit, but one should not really push things too far. Thank you all for your attention, and thank you especially for your support for all victims of the blast. Thank you.
Thank you, Elio. Thank you very much. Last but not least, I'd like to introduce Marc Torbet, who's the president of Offre Joie. I just want to mention that I guess a carefree dive into the Mediterranean has immobilized Marc, and he's now quadriplegic, but his passion for the less fortunate has only burned higher. So I'll let you read his bio, but needless to say that he has been instrumental in harnessing the volunteer army, if you will, in Lebanon, and I'll let him expand on that. Marc, it's all yours. George, we need to unmute Marc.
Thank you, George, for this nice introduction. I am Marc Torbet. I happen to be a volunteer in Offre Joie, Joy of Giving in English, since the age of 7. Before I introduce Offre Joie, allow me also to thank everyone from BEF and all the donors out there with us today on behalf of Offre Joie, the volunteers and the beneficiaries. Offre Joie is a non-political, non-religious, non-governmental organization established in 1985 during the Lebanese Civil War. Its purpose was to build bridges between Lebanese communities and reinforce peace and say no to war. So since 35 years, we have been working on many aspects. That one of them happens to be rehabilitation and reconstruction. And so far, we have been able to rehabilitate 7 out of 19 prisons in Lebanon on international standards, 21 public schools. We have worked for 18 years in one of the poorest regions in the Middle East, as per the United Nations, in Tripoli, which is in North Lebanon. We also rehabilitated villages and schools after the 2006 war in the south of Lebanon, and we have intervened in every single crisis, whether it was an explosion or other crises in Beirut since 1985 until now. Allow me to say that our organization works on a 100% volunteer structure. It has been 35 years now, and it still is. We have almost no employees in Offre Joie, which makes it a family that gathers volunteers coming from all over Lebanon without any discrimination of religion, religious views, or whatsoever. So these volunteers happen to be school or university students that had no previous experience in construction or rehabilitation whatsoever, and they just join us when we make a call and learn some skills and become somehow professionals. As for the Beirut blast, as you all know, it happened on the 4th of August. And in a matter of 48 hours, we were able to do the following. We launched a call for volunteers. 6,000 Lebanese volunteers registered in less than 48 hours. We dispatched teams in all of the regions of Beirut and to do assessments of the most affected areas. It turned out that Maram Khayil and Karantina areas were the most affected and the most vulnerable areas in Beirut. We formed 9 teams of professionals like wood, concrete, glass, aluminum, tiling, plumbing, etc., to go and assess the damages. And we were able to have what we call a BOQ, bills of quantities, to assess the quantities of materials we will be needing. And some Lebanese companies, despite the economical situation, were able to give us some material to start to work with. And in 48 hours as well, we were able to, our urban planning team was able to fix the areas we are working in and name the buildings. And they totaled up to 47 buildings in both areas. Next slide, please. The next one as well, please, George. There you go. So far, we removed more than 250 6 wheels and 200 trucks of debris. Just to give you a sense of the size of the disaster we're living in, more than 15 buildings were structurally damaged. We're talking about structural damage that needs proper technical solutions. We had to take down walls and ceilings and build them again. We had to reinforce the structure of 12 buildings for them not to collapse. We are working in very hard conditions. It was 35 Celsius degrees. Our volunteers until now have not taken one day off, including weekends, and they work from 8 to 5, 8 to 6 in the field, and then from 5 to 10 back in offices. We have 22 departments of volunteers working all together, bringing their laptops, doing meetings, sending minutes of meetings, developing softwares, working all together to make this project possible. Let me assure you that not a single entity in Lebanon can do this kind of work, and we set a goal for ourselves to finish all works and allow for people to come back and live in their houses in less than 4 months. And the first phase was done, and now all houses have been secured, all windows and doors have been changed and repaired, all concrete works have been done, and luckily they will be able to go back to their homes, and they did before winter that's coming in a couple of days, and be safe within their homes. Next slide, please. Let me tell you that a lot of work has, next slide as well, please, George. I just want to arrive to the slide where one more. Here we see various volunteers doing various works. One more, please. You see the scaffoldings installed on the buildings. You see works that have been done with the community, the children that suffered from trauma, and We did a wonderful work with them for them to be happy again. Next slide, please. I just want to arrive to this slide to show you that we are not only doing small repairs of windows, and we are rehabilitating whole buildings. We are making sure to deliver exemplary buildings and exemplary streets. And when we finish, we would have turned areas who suffered from the third biggest explosion in the world and that were completely affected to new buildings where which we are changing the identity of these streets. We are offering streets. We will deliver streets with the with recycling bins around them, with green spaces, with places for children to be able to play, with solar lighting on solar lighting for the streets. We're gonna rehabilitate the whole building from the inside and from the roofs and from the common sections as well. So it's a matter of huge construction works happening around. And I can tell you that there's a team of 250 volunteers that did not leave the site since day one, and that are committed to stay until we finish all of our works. Here I will just tell you that the importance of our work is not the construction works themselves. We could have contracted a company to do so. But what's important for me is two major things. Is people living in these buildings. Let's not forget that we came to the rescue of the people, not for the construction itself. We are by the side of people living in 6 streets. We have been there by their side since day one, listening to their stories, telling them that they are not left alone, that we are here for them, making sure they get everything they need. And you should know that what they tell us back is heartwarming. They feel safe again. They feel that they can sleep at night again. They tell us that they see the future of Lebanon through the young volunteers of ours. They tell us that they dream of a Lebanon where everyone comes together in solidarity like the volunteers did for them. And I think this is that was the most important. And second of all, the experience of the Lebanese youth, 3,500 Lebanese young volunteer came from all the Lebanese region, and some of them had to drive for 2 hours a day back and forth to come from and assist. And this mixture of youth spraying hope in our country is what is most needed, because these people work together and achieved together and achieved what a whole government could not have achieved. This strengthens the bonds between our communities, between our youth, and gives a very clear message that when we unite, we can do miracles for our country and give the good example of how Lebanese should be uniting. And allow me to thank you, because you make this unity possible. So I will be
so much. I'm sorry.
I'm happy. Thank you, George. I'm happy to say that we're starting to remove all the scaffoldings. Most of our buildings have been painted. When we remove the scaffoldings and clean the streets, some life will start to appear. And in a matter of I tell you that we will be delivering exemplary streets full of life, full of people dancing and dancing in the streets. We'll hold a certain ceremony, but we are sure that a ray of hope will come out of these streets as a message to all for all of Lebanon. Thank
you, Mark. Thank you so much. Very uplifting. Nice way to conclude at least the presentation part. We're clearly running over time. So what I propose is probably if people can stick around for another 10 or 15 minutes at most. I've been getting some questions, although some are not being emailed to me now. But so I'm gonna just pose a few questions to each of the panelists, and then we'll call it a wrap. Haneen, if I may start with you. In light of what happened on August 4th, is the World Bank considering reallocating or modifying their support earmarked for Lebanon and focus much more on the damaged area of the port?
Thank you, George. It's a very important question. So yes, we are thinking, considering and acting on refocusing our portfolio. We have a portfolio of over $1 billion already in the country, and in light of the developments and the changing needs, not just from the port of Beirut explosion, but also from the economic financial crises, to redirect it to very urgent matters. One of which is, I've already mentioned, the social safety net and addressing poverty, which is unfortunately rising very fast. I've also mentioned that there will be a trust fund, a financing facility launched probably at the Paris conference when this is to happen, which will be hopefully supporting recovery and some reform and reconstruction efforts via NGOs, non-governmental institutions. And then the much larger work, which is also a priority, such as port reconstruction and the like. This is very much linked to reform and ultimately some kind of an IMF or large program that the government, a macro fiscal program that the government will put in place. So indeed, it's very much a priority for us to focus on these sectors.
Haneen, just a follow-up question. I'm curious to know if, based on your experience and as well as that of the World Bank, if you've experienced in other countries a situation where there's an absence of crisis management center authority that can coordinate the work that needs a coordination. And can we draw any lessons from other countries to deal with this issue, which from our vantage point is proving to be one of the biggest challenges?
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think we do see this in other countries which have the kind of fragility that Lebanon does, and the kind of, I guess, the governance structure and the political intransigence. So, so we have, I mean, countries like Afghanistan, who for coming out of the war have had very difficult time. Iraq is another country. So. I think there are two things. I mean, on the one hand, we need to keep working to help the government to establish some kind of coordinating and to do that, because ultimately, to go to scale, to be able to get to some of the large reconstruction, you're going to need the central authority, the government. But at the same time, especially given the strength of the NGO sector and the private sector in Lebanon, that's something that we should, that we're also trying to support and promote. And maybe it also can, within, some kind of consortium among the NGO sector can be established to sort of, and I think some of that's already happening, seeing it like with the Order of the Engineers and so on. So, but no, I mean, it's not unique to Lebanon, but it's a very severe case in Lebanon. Let me put it that way.
Fair enough. Edgar, if I may turn over to you, I guess a couple of quick questions. One, we've been hearing and reading about an acceleration of immigration of doctors leaving Lebanon. I'm curious to know what the St. George experience is in particular, and what your views are in general about this trend, and is that something that has been ongoing, or has it accelerated as a result of August 4th? That's my first question. A different question is, the one related to a recent central bank circular, which I understand is forcing even with suppliers and of hospitals and the like, the need to only deal with cash currency. And I'm curious to know, how is that impacting your ability to operate?
On the first question, yeah, I mean, the 4th of August has explosion has accelerated a trend that we've started to see since the economic collapse. I mean, the purchasing power of doctors, as when doctors like the rest of us in Lebanon have experienced a massive a reduction in the purchasing power due to the collapse of the currency. And this has been accelerated. I think COVID, or the restriction on travel, is the only thing that is keeping a bit of a tight lid. However, and this is not just St. George. I've been talking to CEOs of other hospitals, and they're all experiencing the hemorrhaging of medical staff. And, we're losing probably the more qualified, because obviously doctors with North American experience and European experience, and the younger ones are, and the more experienced ones are the more attractive, and therefore get the offers. On your second question, yeah, the circular of the central bank, which for your listeners, I mean, medication in Lebanon is been subsidized by the central bank and a lot of what we call medical supplies, to the tune of 85%. And this has allowed us to function, to reduce our costs significantly. Circular, I think 2-3 weeks ago, required suppliers to bring in cash to the central bank. I mean, it's totally impractical, totally unrealistic. And suppliers in that, suppliers of medicine and medical supplies in turn request a hospital to provide them with the cash, and we're not allowed by our contracts to request payments from contractually. We're not allowed to request cash payment from our patients. So supplies are running low. We've sounded the alarm bell. I don't know whether we're going to see a solution in the next couple of days or not. Otherwise, I think we're being throttled.
Thank you, Edgar. Elio, if I may ask you, many schools have been damaged, and kids are not going to school for that reason, as well as the pandemic, as I presume. Can you just briefly give us a sense of how, from a trauma perspective, is the lack of routine and the lack of going to school, how damaging is it, and is that a permanent damage, if you will, or temporary for kids?
Anything disrupting your routine, be it school, home, or whatever, would affect. These kids, they lost their schools, but since they live in the neighborhood, they probably also lost their homes. So it's a double loss. Of course, it will affect them. Of course, rebuilding schools is essential. I don't know how much time it will take, because I don't know if schools are a priority now, considering so many houses and buildings to rebuild. But it will certainly play. Permanent damage, no. We can always help. We can always give support. We can always treat those who suffer the most. Just one thing I want to also add a bit. Most people who go through these traumas, and I showed you the figures, would recover. Yani, most of us would not suffer from long-term effect, but still 10 to 30% is a big figure, considering the huge impact of the cataclysm. Yani, we're talking about maybe 30 to 40,000 people affected who will suffer from serious disorders.
Got it. Got it. Again, I want to be respectful of the time. So let me maybe conclude with Mark. Mark, I touched on this earlier and a couple of times, which is the challenge we've had dealing with the disorder and the chaos, if you will. I'm wondering, can you share with the audience your experience with respect to the value add, if any, of the municipality of Beirut, of the local authorities or the Lebanese army, and are things improving? Any lessons learned there as well that you wish you had known, on August 3rd?
Well, I think the public entities in Lebanon went through a deep coma after the explosion and were almost absent from the scene. It took us a month or so to coordinate with other NGOs and initiatives for us not to duplicate each other's works and work in the same areas. And then the army was asked to organize this matter, and I think they did a good job in organizing the areas and distributing the jobs of NGOs and all over Beirut, and then do the proper assessments. And now they have an assessment of the damages for every building and every apartment, which is a good thing to have after such an explosion. But I don't think it's the responsibility of the army to reconstruct or rebuild all of Beirut. This is ridiculous. No army in the world in history rebuilt a destroyed capital. However, for other public entities, George, I tell you that they are absent, they are in coma, they are very far from people's needs and requests, and I don't think they know what's happening on the ground. So it's like a free to-do space for all of us. I wish it was different. People needed someone, and some needed their government by their side, and winter is coming in a couple of days, and some of them are still without a rooftop or anything over their heads. We have 180 buildings in risk of collapse because of winter, and they are not all treated yet.
So Mark, one question which has to do with what you just said, which is it to build prefabricated units for a temporary stay until such time as people's houses have at least a roof and are winterized? Is that something that, what is your reaction to that initiative? Because it sounds like the Beirut municipality is ready to provide the locations for such units.
I think it's a good temporary solution, but it came very late. If they started preparing now, it will take them a month or two to finalize this project. It should have started since August 5th to be implemented. I think that and since day one, we sounded the alarm that if all NGOs and all of the contractors in Beirut were putting their full force, we will only be covering 40% of the damaged areas. I think we need international support at this level. We need the international contractors to jump in and provide help. With the current workforce we have, it's going to take us more than 2 to 3 years to rebuild the damages in Beirut.
Okay, well, on that note, I apologize, we went over 20 minutes. I hope this this conversation was helpful to you all. Thanks again for your donation, for your commitment to Lebanon. Here at BEF, we will continue to work and diligently to try to deploy your donation dollars in the most responsible way. And we may, you may hear from us again with another webinar if that makes sense. So with that, please have a nice weekend, be safe. And if you are a US citizen, please vote. All the best. Thank you.